Sable didn't know the fire was set deliberately. She didn't know the wolf pup she pulled from the burning wreckage belonged to the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. And she definitely didn't know that using her last breath to save it would mark her forever. Not just with scars, but with the attention of a king who'd sworn to destroy whoever dared attack his bloodline. All she knew was that the flames were spreading fast, and something was crying inside. The abandoned mill on the edge of Thornwood had been empty for years, rotting timbers and collapsed walls that served as shelter for foxes and the occasional drifter. Sable passed it every night on her way home from the healer's cottage where she worked grinding herbs and mixing poultices for old Mirren. She never gave it more than a glance. But tonight, the sky above it glowed orange. Sable dropped her basket and ran. Her lungs burned before she even reached the structure, smoke billowing thick and black against the stars. The heat hit her like a wall, pushing her back, but beneath the roar and crack of burning wood, she heard it, a high, desperate whimpering. "Hello?" she shouted, circling the mill. "Is someone in there?" The whimpering grew louder. Not human. Something smaller. She found the gap in the back wall, a section where the fire hadn't fully taken hold yet. The smoke was thinner here, visibility slightly better. Sable pulled her shawl over her nose and mouth and squeezed through. Inside was an inferno. Flames licked up the walls, devouring dry timber like kindling. The ceiling groaned ominously. She had minutes, maybe less. The sound came from the far corner, a pile of old grain sacks, smoldering but not yet aflame. Sable dropped to her knees, shoving fabric aside with bare hands that screamed in protest. And there, huddled against the stone foundation, was a wolf pup. Not a dog, a wolf. Its fur was silver-white, matted with ash, and its eyes, pale gold, almost amber, stared up at her with an intelligence that made her forget to breathe. "Okay," Sable whispered, reaching for it. "Okay, little one, I've got you." The pup didn't bite, didn't struggle. It simply collapsed into her arms like it had been waiting for her, trembling violently. Sable tucked it against her chest and turned toward the gap she'd entered through. It was gone. Flames had swallowed it completely. Panic clawed at her throat. The smoke was thicker now, choking, blinding. She couldn't see the walls, couldn't tell which direction led out. The ceiling groaned again, louder this time, and something crashed behind her, sending sparks showering across her back. Sable stumbled forward, one hand shielding the pup, the other stretched out in front of her. Her eyes streamed, her lungs screamed for air that wasn't poison. The heat was unbearable, searing her skin even through her clothes. She hit a wall, solid stone, not timber. The foundation. If she followed it, another crash. Pain exploded across her shoulder as something heavy struck her, driving her to her knees. She could smell her own hair burning. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up, or you both die here." Sable forced herself to her feet, the pup clutched tight against her chest. She followed the wall blindly, one agonizing step after another, until her hand found empty air. A window, low and narrow, the wooden frame already consumed by flames. She didn't think. She threw herself through. The night air hit her like salvation. Sable rolled across the ground, smothering the embers on her clothes, and came to rest in the wet grass several feet from the burning mill. The pup was still in her arms, still breathing. She'd done it. She'd actually... The world tilted sideways, her vision blurred, darkened at the edges. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The pain she'd been holding at bay came rushing in. Her shoulder, her hands, her back. Everything burning and everything wrong. The pup whimpered and licked her chin, but Sable couldn't respond, couldn't move, could barely keep her eyes open. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a figure emerging from the tree line, tall, broad-shouldered, moving toward her with inhuman speed. Then nothing. Theron reached her just as she collapsed. He'd felt it the moment the fire started. A pull in his chest, sharp and urgent, drawing him toward Thornwood with a compulsion he couldn't explain. He'd been 3 miles away, reviewing border patrols with Corvin, when the sensation hit him like a blade between the ribs. Cinder, his nephew, his brother's only son. The last piece of Fenric that remained in this world. Theron had shifted without a word to his beta and run. He'd covered the distance in minutes, following the invisible thread that connected him to his blood, and arrived to find the old mill engulfed in flames, and a human woman crawling out of the inferno with Cinder pressed against her heart. Now she lay motionless in the grass, and Theron couldn't make sense of what he was seeing. She was small, painfully thin, with dark hair singed ragged and skin covered in soot and burns. Her clothes were ruined, her hands blistered, her shoulder clearly dislocated from something heavy striking her. By all rights, she should be dead. The fire had been hot enough to melt iron. He could feel the heat radiating from the ruins even now. But she'd survived. More than that, she'd saved Cinder. The pup squirmed free of her limp arms and pressed against Theron's leg, whimpering. He knelt and ran his hands over the silver fur, checking for injuries. Singed in places, but breathing steady. Alive. Because of her. Theron's gaze returned to the woman. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, labored breaths. She needed a healer immediately. The burns on her hands alone would leave permanent damage if not treated. Your Majesty. Corvin emerged from the trees, having followed on foot. His expression shifted from concern to shock as he took in the scene, the burning mill, the unconscious woman, the pup now pressing against Theron's side. What happened? Someone set this fire. Theron's voice was ice. Deliberately, Cinder was inside. Corvin's face hardened. An attack on your blood, on Pact territory. Yes. Theron gathered the woman into his arms, careful of her injuries. She weighed almost nothing. Light as kindling, fragile as ash. And this human pulled him out. Nearly killed herself doing it. Who is she? I don't know. Theron looked down at her face. Young, perhaps 22 or 23, with features that might have been pretty if they weren't slack with unconsciousness and pain. But I intend to find out. He turned toward the tree line, Cinder trotting at his heels. Send trackers to examine the mill once the fire dies. I want to know who did this, how they got onto our land, and why they targeted Cinder specifically. And the woman? She comes with me. Have Isolde prepare the healing chambers. Corvin hesitated. Your Majesty, bringing a human into Ashvale. She saved my nephew's life. Theron's tone left no room for argument. She will be given every care this pack can provide. Anyone who objects can take it up with me personally. He didn't wait for a response. The woman needed help now, and Theron had already wasted too much time. The fortress of Ashvale rose from the mountains like a crown of black stone, its towers catching the moonlight. Theron had grown up within these walls, had taken his father's throne within these walls, and had buried his brother within these walls. It was home in all the ways that mattered. Ancient, fierce, and unforgiving to those who threatened what it protected. But tonight, for the first time, he was bringing someone inside who didn't belong. A human woman with burned hands and no name, who had run into a fire for a wolf pup she'd never seen before. The gates opened at his approach. Warriors lined the courtyard, their expressions shifting from alertness to confusion as they saw what he carried. Summon Isolde, Theron commanded, not slowing. Now. He took the stairs 2 at a time, moving through corridors he could navigate blind. The healing chambers were in the east wing, warm rooms lined with herbs and soft light, where Isolde worked her particular brand of medicine. She was waiting when he arrived, silver hair braided back, her weathered face already assessing. Put her here. Isolde gestured to the nearest bed. And tell me everything. Theron laid the woman down gently, watching as Isolde began her examination. The healer's hands moved with practiced efficiency, cutting away ruined fabric, cataloging injuries. Second-degree burns on the hands and forearms. Third degree on the left shoulder where something struck her. Smoke damage to the lungs. Possible internal bleeding. Isolde's voice was clinical, but her eyes were sharp. She shouldn't have survived this. She pulled Cinder from the fire. Isolde's hands stilled. This human saved your nephew? Yes. Then she's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. The healer resumed her work. Either way, she's strong. Her body is fighting. I can work with that. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. Theron stepped back, giving Isolde room, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. Something about this woman nagged at him, a familiarity he couldn't place, a pull in his chest that had nothing to do with Cinder. Do you know her? He asked. I've never seen her before. She's not from the village. I know every soul in Thornwood. Then where did she come from? Isolde paused, examining the woman's hands more closely. These calluses. She works with herbs, grinding, chopping, mixing. She sniffed the woman's ruined shawl. Comfrey, yarrow, feverfew. Her gaze lifted. She's a healer's apprentice, or something close to it. The cottage on the ridge, Theron said, realization dawning. Old Mirren. That would explain it. Mirren keeps to herself, takes in strays. This one must be recent. Isolde returned to her work. I'll send word to Mirren once she's stable. For now, you should go. I'll stay. Your Majesty. I'll stay, Theron repeated. She risked her life for my family. I won't leave her to face the consequences alone. Isolde studied him for a long moment, something unreadable in her expression. Then she nodded. As you wish. Sable woke to pain. It came in waves, sharp and searing where her hands lay bandaged at her sides, deep and throbbing in her shoulder, raw and scratching in her throat every time she breathed. She tried to open her eyes, but the light was too bright, forcing them shut again with a groan. Easy. A woman's voice, calm and authoritative. You're safe. Don't try to move yet. Sable forced her eyes open despite the pain. The room swam into focus slowly, stone walls softened by tapestries, a fire crackling in a massive hearth. The smell of herbs she recognized. Calendula, honey, something sharper beneath. A healer's chamber, but not Mirren's cottage. This was something else entirely. Where? Her voice came out as a croak. Where am I? Ashvale. The woman moved into view, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. Sable's heart lurched. The pup. The wolf pup, is he? Alive and well, thanks to you. The woman pressed a cup to Sable's lips. Small sips. Your throat took damage from the smoke. The water was cool and sweet, easing the rawness. Sable drank gratefully, her mind spinning. Ashvale. She knew that name. Everyone in the Outer Territories knew that name. The seat of the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf pack in the north. I don't understand, she whispered. Why am I here? Because you saved Cinder's life. The woman set down the cup. I'm Isolde, chief healer of Ashvale, and you've attracted considerable attention. Cinder? The pup you pulled from the fire, he's the nephew of our king, the son of his late brother. Sable's blood ran cold. She'd stumbled into something far bigger than a burning mill and an abandoned animal. I didn't know. I just heard him crying, and I couldn't leave him there. No, Isolde agreed, something like respect entering her voice. You couldn't. That's why you're still breathing. A knock interrupted them. Isolde's expression shifted slightly. Come in. The door opened, and Sable forgot how to breathe. The man who entered was tall, impossibly tall, filling the doorway with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to reshape the air around him. Dark hair fell past his collar, framing a face of sharp angles and barely contained power. He wore simple clothes, black trousers, a gray linen shirt open at the throat. but there was nothing simple about him. He moved like a predator, every step deliberate, controlled. But it was his eyes that held her, gray as winter clouds, pale and piercing, watching her with an intensity that made her want to look away and never look away, all at once. "You're awake." His voice was low, rough-edged. Sable remembered hearing it before, somewhere in the darkness between consciousness and oblivion. "Hold on. Just hold on." "Yes," she managed. He crossed the room to stand beside her bed, and she was acutely aware of how small she must look, bandaged, broken, swallowed by blankets in a bed meant for someone far more important. "What's your name?" "Sable. Sable." He repeated it slowly like he was testing the weight of it. "I'm Theron." She knew. Of course she knew. The Alpha King of Ashvale, ruler of the Northern Territories, the man they called the Iron Wolf. Stories of him had reached even Mirren's isolated cottage, tales of a young king who'd taken the throne after his father's death, who ruled with ruthless efficiency, who had never taken a mate despite the council's pressure. "Your Majesty," she whispered, struggling to rise. "Don't." His hand caught her uninjured shoulder, gentle but firm, pressing her back into the pillows. "You nearly died saving my nephew. You don't bow to me." His touch sent a jolt of recognition through her, something that went beyond physical contact, beyond explanation. Sable's breathing stuttered, and she saw his eyes widen slightly, felt his hand tighten for a fraction of a second before he withdrew. "The fire," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Tell me what you saw." Sable gathered her scattered thoughts. "I was walking home from Mirren's cottage. I saw the smoke, heard something crying inside. I didn't think. I just went in." "You didn't think." His jaw tightened. "You ran into a burning building without thinking. There was something alive in there. You could have died. So could he." Sable met his gaze, refusing to look away despite the intensity burning there. "I couldn't just watch." A shadow crossed Theron's features. Frustration, admiration, something deeper she couldn't name. He turned to Isolde. "Leave us." The healer raised an eyebrow but gathered her supplies without argument. The door clicked shut behind her. Theron pulled a chair close to the bed and sat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. This close she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. The Alpha King looked worn thin. "The fire was set deliberately," he said quietly. "Someone put cinder in that mill and lit it on fire, knowing he couldn't escape." Sable's stomach dropped. "Someone tried to murder him?" "Yes. A pup barely 6 months old." His hands clenched. "My brother's son. The only family I have left." "Why would anyone—" "That's what I need to find out." Theron's eyes held hers. "You were the only person there. You might have seen something, heard something, even if you don't realize it." Sable tried to think back, but the memories were fragmented, smoke and heat and desperate scrambling. "I didn't see anyone. The mill was already burning when I arrived. I heard him crying and I couldn't leave him." "Nothing else? No scent? No tracks? No sound of someone fleeing?" She shook her head, then winced as her shoulder protested. "I'm sorry. I wish I could help." Theron studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension in his posture eased. "You've already helped more than you know. I just did what anyone would do." "No." His voice was firm. "You did what most people wouldn't dream of doing. You ran into a fire for a creature you'd never met, knowing you might not come out." He paused. "That's not ordinary." Sable looked down at her bandaged hands. The burns would scar. She knew that much about healing. She'd carry marks from that night for the rest of her life. "Isolde says you work for Mirren," Theron continued, "the hedge witch on the ridge." "She's not a witch. She's a healer." The distinction is lost on most. Something almost like a smile tugged at his mouth. "How long have you been with her?" 3 years. She found me on the road after Sable stopped. She didn't talk about that. Not to anyone. After what? She met his eyes, saw the genuine curiosity there, and felt something dangerous stir in her chest. This man was the Alpha King. He had no business looking at her like she mattered, like her story was worth hearing. After my village burned, she said flatly, rogues came through, killed everyone. I was the only survivor. Theron went very still. I was 14. Mirren found me half dead in a ditch 2 days later. Sable forced the words out mechanically. She took me in, taught me everything she knows. I've been with her ever since. The silence stretched. When Theron finally spoke, his voice was rough. I'm sorry. It was 8 years ago. That doesn't make it easier. No, it didn't. But she'd learned to live with it. The nightmares, the fear, the way the smell of smoke still made her hands shake. The fire at the mill, she said slowly. Do you think it's connected? To what happened to my village? I don't know yet. Theron's expression hardened. But I intend to find out. He stood, and she felt the loss of his proximity like a physical thing. You'll stay here until you're healed. I won't hear arguments about it. Mirren has been informed, and she agrees you're in no condition to travel. Stay here, in Ashvale, in the castle, under my protection. His eyes held hers with fierce intensity. Someone tried to kill my nephew, and you're the only witness. Until I know who's responsible and why, you're not safe out there. Sable wanted to argue. She'd spent 8 years building a life that was small and quiet and invisible. The kind of life where no one noticed her, where danger passed her by. Coming to the attention of the Alpha King was the opposite of everything she'd worked for. But the fire had changed that. She couldn't undo it now. How long? She asked. As long as it takes. That's not an answer. No, Theron agreed. But it's all I have. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Cinder has been asking for you. When you're strong enough, I'd like you to see him. The pup has been asking for me? His expression softened. He hasn't left the corridor outside this room in 2 days. He knows you saved him. Wolves don't forget that kind of debt. He left before she could respond, the door closing quietly behind him. Sable lay in the silence, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. 2 days ago, she'd been grinding herbs in Mirren's cottage, invisible and unremarkable. Now she was in the Alpha King's castle, under his protection, entangled in a conspiracy she didn't understand, and something about the way Theron had touched her shoulder, the spark that had passed between them, nagged at the edges of her consciousness. Something that felt like recognition, something that felt like fate. She pushed the thought away. She didn't believe in fate. Fate was for people whose villages hadn't burned, whose families hadn't died, whose lives hadn't taught them that the world was cruel and random and owed you nothing. But as sleep pulled her under again, she could have sworn she heard the soft padding of paws outside her door, and felt, for the first time in 8 years, something that might have been hope. A week passed before Sable could walk without assistance. The burns on her hands were healing faster than Isolde expected, pink and tender, but no longer weeping. Her shoulder had been reset and bound, the deep tissue damage responding to Isolde's poultices with remarkable speed. Even her lungs, raw from smoke, had cleared enough that breathing no longer felt like swallowing glass. You heal like one of us, Isolde remarked one morning, unwrapping Sable's bandages with clinical precision. I've never seen a human recover this quickly from third-degree burns. Sable didn't have an explanation. She'd always healed fast, cuts closing overnight, bruises fading within days. Mirren had noticed it too, had called it a gift, and left it at that. Whatever the reason, Sable had learned not to question it. Some things simply were. Can I see him today? She asked. Cinder? Isolde's expression softened. He's been waiting outside your door every morning. I think he'd be heartbroken if you didn't. The corridor beyond the healing chambers was wider than Sable expected, lined with windows that let in pale mountain light. And there, curled against the wall like he'd taken root, was Cinder. He lifted his head the moment she appeared, those amber eyes fixing on her with startling intensity. Then he was on his feet, bounding toward her, his silver-white fur gleaming. Sable knelt carefully, mindful of her shoulder, and Cinder pressed his head against her chest. A low whine escaped him, relief and recognition, and something that felt almost like gratitude. "Hey," she whispered, running her fingers through his fur. "I'm okay. We're both okay." Cinder's tail wagged, and he licked her chin with such enthusiasm that she laughed despite everything. "He hasn't left this corridor since you arrived." Sable looked up to find Theron watching from several feet away, his expression unreadable. He was dressed more formally today, dark leather and silver clasps, but his eyes held the same weary intensity she'd seen before. "He's a loyal pup," she said. "He's bonded to you." Theron moved closer, his gaze shifting between her and Cinder. "It happens sometimes, when a wolf recognizes someone who saved their life. The connection goes deep." "I didn't mean for that to happen." "I know." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "But it did, and now he won't leave your side. Isolde says he's barely eaten, barely slept. He was waiting for you to wake up." Sable looked down at Cinder, who was now pressed against her legs, his small body trembling slightly. "He's just a pup. He shouldn't have to carry this kind of weight." "No," Theron agreed quietly. "He shouldn't." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Theron extended his hand. "Come, there's something I need to show you." He led her through corridors that grew increasingly grand, vaulted ceilings carved with wolf imagery, tapestries depicting hunts and battles, windows overlooking courtyards where warriors trained with brutal efficiency. Ashvale was beautiful in the way. Mountains were beautiful. Vast, unforgiving, demanding respect. Sable felt insignificant within its walls, a small human woman with burned hands and no place in this world of power and politics. But Cinder trotted beside her like she belonged, and somehow that made it easier. They stopped before a heavy oak door, reinforced with iron bands. Theron pushed it open to reveal a study lined with maps and correspondence, a massive desk dominating the center. "This was my brother's office," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Fenric handled intelligence, threats to the pack, movements of enemy forces, anything that might destabilize our borders." "Cinder's father?" "Yes." Theron crossed to the desk, lifting a stack of documents. Before he died, he was investigating something, a pattern he'd noticed in the attacks on outer villages. Sable's pulse kicked. "What kind of pattern?" "Rogues hitting settlements on the edges of pack territory, burning everything, leaving no survivors." Theron's eyes met hers. "Sound familiar?" The room tilted. Sable gripped the edge of a chair, steadying herself. "My village. You think it's connected?" "I think whoever ordered the attack on Cinder has been operating for years, destabilizing the region, weakening my borders, making me look like a king who can't protect his people." Theron set down the documents. "And I think your village was one of their targets." "Why?" "We were nothing. Farmers and fishermen. We had nothing anyone would want." "You had location." Theron pulled a map from the stack, spreading it across the desk. "Your village sat on a supply route between Ashvale and the Eastern Territories. Taking it out disrupted trade for months." Sable stared at the map, at the small dot that represented everything she'd lost. "You're saying my family died for logistics?" "I'm saying they died because someone is waging a shadow war against this pack, and they don't care who gets caught in the crossfire." Cinder whined softly, pressing against her legs. Sable reached down automatically, her fingers finding his fur. The contact grounded her, kept her from spiraling into the grief that never quite went away. "Shh. Who?" she asked. "Who's doing this?" That's what Fenric was trying to find out. Theron's jaw tightened. He got close, too close. 3 months ago, he was killed in what looked like a hunting accident, His body was found at the bottom of a ravine. You don't think it was an accident? I know it wasn't. Theron's voice was ice. My brother was the best tracker in the Northern Territories. He didn't fall. He was pushed. Sable absorbed this, her mind racing. And now someone tried to kill his son. Whoever murdered Fenric wants his entire bloodline erased. Cinder is the last loose end. Theron looked at the pup with fierce protectiveness. They failed because of you. I was just in the right place at the right time. Were you? Theron studied her with uncomfortable intensity. You survived a fire that should have killed you. You healed from burns that should have taken months. And you happened to be walking past that mill at the exact moment Cinder needed saving. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. He moved closer and she caught his scent, pine and wood smoke and something wilder beneath. But I've learned not to believe in coincidence. A knock interrupted them. Corvin entered, his expression grim. Your Majesty, we found something at the mill site. Theron's posture shifted, predatory alertness replacing thoughtful contemplation. Show me. The object was small, a silver clasp, half melted but still recognizable. Corvin had found it buried in the ash near where Cinder had been trapped. Theron held it up to the light, and Sable watched his composure slip. The careful control gave way, revealing something raw beneath. You recognize it, she said. It's a council insignia. His voice was dangerously quiet. Only 7 people in this territory have the right to wear this mark. Someone from your own council tried to kill Cinder? Theron didn't answer immediately. He crossed to a cabinet, pulling out a wooden box. Inside, arranged on velvet, were 7 identical clasps, each bearing the same symbol, each representing a seat of power in his inner circle. He compared the melted clasp to the others, his jaw tight. Varen, he said finally. Lord Varen's insignia. Who is Lord Varen? My father's oldest ally. He's served this pack for 30 years. Theron's hand clenched around the clasp. He held me when I was a child. Swore loyalty on my father's grave. Maybe someone stole it. Planted it to frame him. Maybe. But Theron didn't sound convinced. Or maybe I've had a traitor in my council this entire time. He turned to Corvin. Where is Varen now? His estate. He left the castle 2 days ago, claiming illness. Convenient timing. Theron set down the clasp with deliberate care. I want eyes on him, discreetly. Don't let him know he's being watched. And if he runs? Then we have our answer. Corvin nodded and departed. Theron stood motionless, staring at the insignia like it had personally betrayed him. I'm sorry, Sable said quietly. For what? For all of it. Your brother. The betrayal. Having to suspect people you trusted. He looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression squeezed something behind her ribs. Fenric would have known what to do. He had instincts for this kind of thing. Could smell a lie from across the room. Could read people like I read maps. His voice roughened. I'm just trying not to destroy everything he built. You're doing more than that. Sable moved closer, drawn by an impulse she didn't fully understand. You're protecting your people, hunting down threats, taking care of Cinder. That's not destruction. That's leadership. Is it? Theron's laugh was bitter. I've spent 3 years chasing shadows while my enemies grew stronger. My brother is dead. My nephew is nearly murdered, and I didn't see any of it coming. You see it now. Too late. Not too late for Cinder. She gestured to the pup, who had curled up by the fire, watching them with those golden eyes. Not too late for whatever comes next. Theron studied her for a long moment. You're remarkably calm for someone who just learned she's caught in the middle of a conspiracy. I learned a long time ago that panic doesn't change anything. Sable held his gaze. You survive, or you don't. Falling apart is a luxury I've never been able to afford. His expression shifted. Recognition, perhaps? Or respect? Fenric would have liked you. I wish I could have met him. So do I. Theron turned back to the window, his shoulders rigid. He would have figured this out by now. Would have known exactly which threads to pull, which allies to trust. Sable hesitated, then said, "Maybe I can help." He looked at her sharply. "How?" "I don't know yet. But I've spent 8 years surviving on instinct, reading people, knowing when something's wrong before I can explain why." She took a breath. "Mirren calls it a gift. Maybe it's time I used it for something that matters." "That could be dangerous." "More dangerous than being hunted by someone who already tried to kill me once?" She raised an eyebrow. "I was at that fire, Theron. Whoever did this knows I survived. Knows I might have seen something. I'm already a target." His jaw worked, but he didn't argue. "What do you propose?" "Let me observe. The council, the servants, anyone who had access to information about Cinder's location. Sometimes people reveal more than they realize when they think no one important is watching." She stepped closer. "I owe Cinder my life as much as he owes me his. Let me help find who did this." Theron was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fine. But if there's any sign of danger, any hint that you've been made as more than a guest, you tell me immediately. No heroics." "Agreed. I mean it, Sable." He closed the distance between them, and suddenly she was aware of how close he was, the heat radiating from his body, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. "I won't lose anyone else. Not to Varen. Not to this conspiracy. Not to anything." Her breath caught. "You barely know me." "I know enough." His voice dropped low. "I know you ran into a fire for a stranger. I know you've survived things that would break most people. I know you look at Cinder like he matters, like his life has value beyond what he represents politically." He raised his hand, hesitated, and then let it fall. "That's enough to know you're worth protecting." The air between them crackled with something unnamed. Sable felt it, that same spark from when he'd touched her shoulder days ago. Like her body knew something her mind hadn't caught up to yet. "What is this?" she whispered. "This feeling. Every time you're close, I don't know." But the roughness in his voice suggested he felt it too. "I've never experienced anything like it." Before either could say more, Corvin burst through the door. "Your Majesty, Varen's estate is empty. He's gone, and he's taken half his household guard with him." The hunt for Varen consumed the next 3 days. Theron's trackers fanned across the territory, following trails that went cold, pursuing rumors that led nowhere. The traitor had planned his escape well, provisions cached along hidden routes, contacts in villages beyond pack borders, a network of loyalists Theron hadn't known existed. Sable watched from the edges, feeling useless. Her plan to observe the castle's occupants had been postponed indefinitely. Theron refused to let her move freely while Varen was unaccounted for. "He knows you survived," Theron had said, his expression brooking no argument. "If he's smart, and he is, he'll try to eliminate loose ends. That means you." So she waited, and healed, and spent hours with Cinder, who seemed to sense her frustration. The pup followed her everywhere, to meals in the great hall where warriors watched her with curious eyes, to the library where she searched Fenric's notes for anything useful, to the battlements where she stood at night, staring at stars she'd once watched from her village. On the 3rd night, Theron found her there. "You should be sleeping," he said, joining her at the wall. "So should you." He didn't argue, just stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body against the mountain cold. Cinder was asleep in her chambers, tired from a day of following her up and down stairs. "We lost his trail near the eastern border," Theron said quietly. "He's gone to ground somewhere. Could be weeks before we find him. And in the meantime? In the meantime, I keep you safe and hope he makes a mistake." Sable turned to look at him. The moonlight silvered his features, softening the harsh lines, making him look younger. Tired. Human. "You can't protect everyone, you know," she said gently. "I can try." "At what cost?" You haven't slept in days. Corvin says you've barely eaten. You're running yourself into the ground. Corvin talks too much. Corvin is worried about you." She hesitated, then added, "So am I." Theron looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the mask fall away. The iron control that held him together, always. It wavered. "I keep thinking about Fenric," he said, his voice rough. "About the last conversation we had. He wanted to tell me something about his investigation. But I was busy. Council meetings, border disputes, all the things that seemed important at the time." He swallowed hard. "I told him we'd talk later, and then there was no later." "That's not your fault, isn't it?" His laugh was hollow. "I'm the Alpha King. Everything that happens in this territory is my responsibility. Every failure, every death, and every threat I should have seen coming. That's an impossible standard. It's the only standard that matters." He gripped the stone wall, knuckles white. "If I'd listened to Fenric, maybe he'd still be alive. If I'd paid more attention to Varen, maybe Cinder would never have been in danger. If I'd—" "Stop." Sable put her hand on his arm, felt the muscle tense beneath her touch. "Stop torturing yourself with what-ifs. They don't change anything. They're all I have." "No." She turned him to face her, her hand still on his arm. "You have a pack that would die for you. You have a nephew who needs you. You have people working day and night to find Varen and bring him to justice." She paused. "You have me." Theron went very still. "Sable. I know I'm just a human, a stranger you found half dead outside a burning building, but I'm here, and I'm not leaving. And I'm telling you that carrying this alone will kill you faster than any traitor." His hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. The touch sent heat through her. Warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. She saw his pupils dilate, heard his breathing change. "That feeling you asked about," he said quietly. "The one that happens when we're close." "Yes? I think I know what it is." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "But if I'm right, it changes everything. And I don't want to pressure you. Not when you're still healing. Not when your whole life has been upended because of my family." "Tell me anyway." He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Among my kind, there's a bond that forms between mates. It's rare. Most wolves choose their partners based on politics or compatibility, but sometimes, very rarely, the bond chooses for you." His eyes searched hers. "It feels like recognition, like your soul has been waiting for someone and suddenly there they are." Sable's pulse quickened. "You're saying I'm saying it might be possible, that the pull between us, the way I can't stop thinking about you, the way my wolf has been restless since the moment I saw you." He broke off, seeming to struggle for control. "I've never felt this before. Never wanted anyone the way I want you." She should pull away. Should remind him that she was nobody, a healer's apprentice with a dead family and a knack for survival. That she had no place in his world, no right to stand beside an Alpha King. Instead, she stepped closer. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I've been trying to ignore it, telling myself it's just proximity, just stress, just my mind playing tricks. But every time you walk into a room, every time you look at me—" She shook her head. "It's like my whole body knows something my brain hasn't figured out yet." Theron's hand rose to cup her cheek, gentle despite its strength. "I won't rush you. Whatever this is, whatever it might become, you have a choice. You'll always have a choice." "What if I'm making it now?" The air left his lungs. "Sable." She rose on her toes and kissed him. For a heartbeat he was frozen. Then his arms came around her, pulling her against him, and he kissed her back with a desperation that stole her breath. His lips were warm, demanding, tasting of need too long denied. One hand cradled her jaw while the other pressed against the small of her back, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron pressed his forehead to hers. I should be noble about this, he murmured. Should give you time, give you space. Make sure you know what you're getting into. And instead? His laugh was shaky. Instead, I'm standing here wondering how fast I can get the council to approve a mating ceremony. Sable laughed despite herself. Maybe we should focus on catching Varen first. Probably wise. But he didn't let go of her. Tell me this is real. Tell me I'm not imagining it. It's real. She pressed her hand over his heart, felt it pounding beneath her palm. I don't understand it, and it terrifies me, but it's real. Then stay. His voice cracked slightly. Not as a guest, not as a witness. Stay because you want to. Stay and let me show you what this could be. She thought about the life she'd built. Quiet, invisible, safe. The cottage with Mirren, the routine of herbs and healing, the careful walls she'd constructed around her heart. Then she thought about the fire, about Cinder's trusting eyes, about this man who carried a kingdom on his shoulders and still looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Ask me again, she said, when Varen is caught and Cinder is safe. Ask me then, and I'll give you a real answer. That's not a no. No, she agreed. It's not. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a plea. And when they finally returned to the castle, his hand warm in hers, Sable let herself imagine a future she'd never dared want. Which made it all the more devastating when Corvin met them at the door, his face ashen. Your Majesty. We intercepted a message from Varen to his contacts in the east. Theron's posture went rigid. And? Corvin's gaze flickered to Sable, then back to his king. He's not working alone. He's been taking orders from someone else, someone inside the castle walls. The words hit like ice water. Someone inside. Another traitor, still among them, watching everything. Watching her. Who? Theron demanded. We don't know yet. But the message mentioned the human woman. Corvin's expression was grim. They want her dead, Your Majesty, and they want it done before the next full moon. Sable felt the blood drain from her face. The full moon was in 4 days. 4 days. Sable had 4 days before someone inside these walls tried to kill her. The castle that had begun to feel like sanctuary now felt like a cage. Every servant who passed her in the corridors, every guard who stood watch outside her door, every council member who glanced her way during meals, any of them could be the second traitor. Any of them could be waiting for the right moment to strike. Theron had tripled her security, assigning his most trusted warriors to shadow her movements. Corvin himself took the night watch, sleeping outside her chambers with a sword across his knees. Cinder refused to leave her side, his small body pressed against her legs whenever she sat, his golden gaze tracking every person who came near. But none of it felt like enough. We need to draw them out, Sable said on the second night, pacing Theron's study while he reviewed intercepted messages. Waiting for them to make a move gives them the advantage. And what do you suggest? Using yourself as bait? Theron's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. It might be our only option. It's not an option at all. He stood, crossing to her, his hands catching her shoulders. I won't risk you. Not for information, not for strategy, not for anything. Theron. No. The word was absolute. I've already lost my brother. I nearly lost Cinder. I will not stand by and watch you walk into danger. And if they succeed anyway, if they find a way past your guards, past Corvin, past all of it, at least if we control the situation. We're not having this conversation. Yes, we are. She pulled free of his grip, frustration boiling over. I'm not a porcelain doll, Theron. I survived a fire that should have killed me. I survived rogues burning my village to the ground. I've been surviving my whole life, and I won't stop now just because you're afraid of losing me. The words hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. Theron's jaw worked. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. You're right. I am afraid. He looked away, his guard dropping. I've spent 3 years being the Alpha King, making decisions that cost lives, carrying weight that would crush most men. I thought I understood fear. His eyes returned to hers. I didn't. Not until you. Sable's anger faltered. Theron. When I saw you outside that mill, barely breathing, covered in burns. He shook his head. Something broke inside me, something I didn't know could break. And every moment since, every hour you've been in this castle, all I can think about is how to keep you safe. How to make sure I never have to feel that again. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. I'm not asking you to let me face this alone. I'm asking you to trust me, to let me be part of the solution instead of just the problem everyone's trying to protect. His fingers tightened around hers. If something happened to you, then you'd survive it. The same way you survived losing Fenric. The same way I survived losing everyone I loved. She raised their joined hands, pressing them against her heart. But I don't plan on dying. I plan on helping you catch whoever's doing this, and then I plan on figuring out what this thing between us actually means. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're infuriatingly stubborn. I learned from the best. Mirren doesn't take no for an answer either. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Fine, we'll discuss options. But, he added before she could respond, any plan that puts you in direct danger gets vetoed. Non-negotiable. Agreed? He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She felt his heartbeat, rapid despite his controlled exterior, and understood what it cost him to compromise. 3 years, he whispered against her temple. I've been alone for 3 years, carrying this kingdom, trusting no one completely. And then, you appear out of nowhere, smelling like smoke and stubbornness. And suddenly, I can't imagine doing any of it without you. You won't have to. She tilted her head back to look at him. We're going to figure this out. Together. He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. Together. The trap was Sable's idea. If the traitor wanted her dead before the full moon, they would need to act soon, and they would need access. So far, Theron's security had made that impossible. But what if there was a gap? A moment of vulnerability that seemed accidental? The healing gardens, Sable suggested during their strategy session. Isolde wants me to help harvest moon petal blossoms. It's delicate work, has to be done at twilight, and the gardens are partially exposed to anyone watching from the upper corridors. Corvin frowned. You'd be visible. Vulnerable. Exactly. But you'd have warriors hidden in the surrounding buildings, watching for anyone who takes the bait. Theron's expression was granite. I don't like it. You don't have to like it. You just have to admit it could work. The argument lasted another hour, but in the end, strategy won over fear. They set the trap for the third evening, one day before the full moon deadline. Sable walked into the healing gardens at twilight, her movements deliberately casual. Isolde had agreed to the plan reluctantly, providing cover by actually teaching Sable to harvest the delicate silver blossoms. The work required focus. The petals bruised easily and lost potency if handled roughly. But beneath her concentration, Sable's senses were hyper-aware. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of shadow, and every distant footstep echoed through her consciousness. Cinder had been left inside, despite his protests. His presence would signal that something was wrong. The pup never left her side anymore. His absence was part of the deception. An hour passed, then 2. The moon rose, casting silver light across the garden, and Sable began to wonder if the traitor had seen through their plan. Then she heard it. A soft footfall behind her, too deliberate to be accident. She didn't turn, kept her hands moving among the blossoms, her breathing steady. You're harder to kill than expected. The voice was female, cold, familiar. The fire should have finished you. Varen swore it would. Sable's blood chilled. She knew that voice. Slowly she turned. Isolde stood at the garden's edge, a knife gleaming in her hand. The healer who had tended her wounds, who had watched over her recovery, who had seemed so kind. Her face was now a mask of contempt. "You," Sable breathed. "Me." Isolde moved closer, the blade catching moonlight. "Did you really think Varen acted alone? That a man who couldn't organize a council meeting managed to evade Theron's trackers for 3 days? You helped him escape. I've been helping him for years, feeding him information, covering his tracks, making sure no one looked too closely at the accidents that kept happening to Fenric's investigation." Her smile was cruel. The Alpha King trusts his healer. Never occurs to him that the woman binding his wounds might be the one causing them. Sable's mind raced. The hidden warriors should be moving by now, should have heard the confession. She just needed to keep Isolde talking. "Why? What did Theron ever do to you?" "Theron?" Isolde laughed bitterly. "This isn't about Theron. This is about what his father did to my family, what his entire bloodline has taken from mine for 3 generations. I don't understand." "No, you wouldn't. You're human. You don't know our history." Isolde's grip tightened on the knife. "My grandmother was supposed to be Alpha Queen. She was promised to Theron's grandfather, the bond forming between them. But then he met another woman, a nobody from a lesser pack. And suddenly the promise meant nothing. My grandmother was cast aside, humiliated, left to watch another woman take everything that should have been hers. That was generations ago. Pain doesn't forget. It just waits." Isolde's eyes glittered. "Varen's family suffered similar slights. We found each other, recognized the same hunger for justice, and we decided that if we couldn't have the throne, we'd destroy everyone who sat on it. Including a 6-month-old pup? With you gone and Theron unmated, Cinder was the last hope for continuing the bloodline. He had to die." "You're insane. I'm patient." Isolde raised the knife. "Just like you have to die. You've gotten too close to Theron, wormed your way into his heart. He might actually mate you. Continue the line. We can't allow that." She lunged. Sable dove sideways, her healer's training giving her just enough warning to read the movement. The blade sliced through air where her throat had been, and then warriors were pouring from the buildings, Corvin leading the charge, his sword drawn and his face thunderous. Isolde spun, realizing the trap too late. She tried to run, but Corvin was faster, tackling her to the ground with brutal efficiency. The knife skittered across stone, out of reach. "Hold her," Theron's voice commanded, and Sable looked up to see him emerging from the shadows, his expression murderous. He crossed to Sable first, his hands running over her, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," she said, her voice shakier than she wanted. "She didn't touch me. She almost did." His arms came around her, crushing her against his chest. But she didn't." Sable held on to him, feeling his heartbeat race beneath her cheek. The plan worked. Behind them, Isolde was being hauled to her feet, her hands bound, her face twisted with rage. "You think this changes anything? Varen is still out there. Others share our cause. You can't kill an idea, Theron. You can't." "Gag her," Theron said coldly, not looking away from Sable. "I'll deal with her later." Corvin complied, and Isolde's threats dissolved into muffled fury as she was dragged away. In the sudden silence, Sable let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "It's over?" "Not yet." Theron's voice was grim. "Varen is still free," and Isolde mentioned others. "But the immediate threat—" He cupped her face in his hands. "You're safe. That's what matters right now." She leaned into his touch, weariness crashing over her. "What happens now?" "Now we make Isolde talk. Find out who else is involved, where Varen is hiding, how deep this conspiracy goes." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "And then we end it. Permanently." Isolde broke faster than expected. Faced with execution for treason, she traded information for exile. Names, locations, the full scope of the conspiracy. Varen had a dozen supporters scattered across the territory, most in positions of minor power, all united by old grievances and new ambition. But the most valuable piece came last. "There's a meeting," Isolde said, her voice hollow with defeat. "Tomorrow night, at the old fortress ruins near Blackrock Pass. Varen is gathering his remaining loyalists for a final strike. They're planning to attack the castle during the full moon celebration, when security is focused outward." Theron stood motionless, absorbing this. The full moon celebration was a sacred tradition. The entire pack gathered in the Great Hall, leaving the castle's defenses spread thin. "How many?" Corvin asked. 30, maybe 40. Enough to breach the walls if they strike at the right moment. "And Varen will be at this meeting?" "He's leading it. He thinks he's won. Thinks Isolde is still loyal, still feeding him information." Her laugh was bitter. "He doesn't know I've already lost everything." Theron turned to Corvin. "Assemble the War Council. We move on Blackrock Pass tonight." The ride to the ruins took 4 hours through treacherous mountain terrain. Sable had insisted on coming, over Theron's furious objections, arguing that her presence might draw out any hesitant conspirators. If Varen's people saw her alive, saw that their assassination attempts had failed, it might shake their confidence. Privately, she simply couldn't bear to wait at the castle, not knowing if Theron would return. They approached the ruins under cover of darkness, 24 of Theron's most elite warriors moving silent as shadows through the trees. The old fortress loomed against the stars, half collapsed but still imposing, torchlight flickering in what remained of the Great Hall. 32 heat signatures inside," whispered Brennick, the pack's best scout. Heavily armed, Varen is at the center, addressing them. Theron's jaw tightened. "Surround the perimeter. No one escapes." The warriors dispersed, melting into the darkness. Sable stayed close to Theron, Cinder pressed against her legs. The pup had refused to be left behind, and in the end, Theron had relented. Whatever bond connected them seemed to grant Cinder an uncanny sense for danger. They waited until Corvin's signal, a low whistle that echoed off stone. Then Theron stepped into the torchlight, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Varen." The conspirators spun, weapons drawn, faces registering shock. Varen stood at the hall's center, older than Sable had expected, with silver-streaked hair and cold blue eyes that showed no fear. "Theron." He smiled as if greeting an old friend. "I wondered when you'd find us. It's over. Your people are surrounded. Isolde has confessed everything." A muscle twitched in Varen's jaw. Rage, quickly suppressed. "Isolde was always weak. I should have known she'd break. Surrender now, and I'll grant quick deaths to your followers. Continue this, and I'll make examples of every one of them." "Quick deaths?" Varen laughed. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about winning or losing. This is about legacy. Your bloodline has ruled for 5 generations, crushing anyone who threatened your power. We're simply returning the favor. My bloodline protected this territory, built alliances, kept the peace. Your bloodline murdered my grandfather for speaking truth to power, exiled my father for demanding justice, took everything from my family and called it maintaining order." Varen's voice hardened. "I've waited 40 years for this moment. I won't surrender it now." He moved faster than a man his age should be able to move, shifting forms mid-stride, becoming a massive gray wolf that launched itself at Theron with killing intent. But Theron was faster. His own shift was explosive, bones reforming, muscles expanding, until a black wolf twice Varen's size met the attack head-on. They collided with a force that shook the stones, fangs and claws tearing, growls echoing through the ruins. Around them, chaos erupted. Theron's warriors engaged the conspirators, steel clashing against steel, wolves fighting in a brutal melee. Sable pressed herself against a pillar, Cinder growling at her feet, watching the battle with horror and fascination. Theron was magnificent. Even wounded, even running on fumes from days without sleep. He fought with a ferocity that made Varen look slow by comparison. Blood streaked his black fur, but he kept pressing forward, driving the older wolf back and refusing to give ground. Then Varen stumbled. His hind leg buckled. Old injury, perhaps, or simple age, and Theron was on him, jaws closing around his throat, pinning him to the ground. For a long moment, nothing moved. The remaining conspirators, seeing their leader defeated, dropped their weapons. Theron's warriors closed in, binding hands, confiscating blades. Theron shifted back to human form, one hand still pressed against Varen's throat, his chest heaving. Yield. Varen also shifted back, blood running from wounds that would have killed a lesser wolf, laughed wetly. You think this ends anything? There will always be others. Always someone willing to fight against your family's tyranny. Maybe. Theron's voice was ice. But they'll do it without you. He looked at Corvin. Take him. He stands trial at dawn. The trial was brief. Evidence of Varen's crimes stretched back decades. Fenric's murder, Cinder's attempted assassination, the attack on Sable's village 8 years ago. That last revelation hit her like a physical blow. The rogues who had burned her home, killed her family, hadn't been random raiders. They'd been Varen's agents, eliminating a village that sat on a strategic supply route. Her parents had died because of logistics, because of a man's 40-year grudge against a family they'd never met. Sable sat in the gallery, Cinder in her lap, her hands trembling as the full weight of it settled over her. 8 years of nightmares. 8 years of wondering why. And now she knew. And the knowledge was both devastating and strangely freeing. There had been a reason, even if it was monstrous. She hadn't been forgotten by the universe. She'd been caught in someone else's war. The council found Varen guilty on all counts. Theron pronounced the sentence, death by execution, to be carried out immediately. Sable didn't attend. She'd seen enough death to last several lifetimes. Instead, she walked to the healing gardens. Empty now, Isolde's betrayal still raw, and sat among the moon petal blossoms she'd been harvesting when everything changed. Cinder curled against her side, his warmth a comfort she hadn't known she needed. It's strange, she said quietly, knowing the pup couldn't understand but needing to voice it anyway. I spent 8 years wondering why. Why my village? Why my family? Why I survived when everyone else died? And now I know. And it doesn't change anything. They're still gone. Cinder whined softly, pressing closer. But you're here. She stroked his silver fur. And Theron is here. And maybe that's enough. Maybe surviving means finding new reasons to keep going, even when the old ones are gone. Footsteps approached. Sable didn't need to look to know who it was. She felt his presence like warmth on her skin, that bond humming between them. Theron sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. He said nothing for a long moment, just breathed with her, sharing the silence. It's done, he said finally. Varen is dead. His conspirators will face trial over the coming weeks. The threat is ended. Is it ever really ended? No. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. But we've bought peace. Time to rebuild, to strengthen what was weakened. Time to live instead of just survive. Sable turned to look at him. He was drained, dark circles under his eyes, new scars crossing old ones, the weight of leadership heavier than ever. But beneath the weariness, she saw something else. Hope. You promised to ask me something, she said quietly. After Varen was caught. After Cinder was safe. His breathing stuttered. I remember. Well. She squeezed his hand. Cinder is safe. Varen is caught. It's after. Theron turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. In the moonlight, his gray eyes were luminous, vulnerable in a way she suspected few people ever saw. Stay, he said simply. Not as a guest, not as a witness, not as someone under my protection. Stay because you want to. Stay and be my mate, my partner, my queen. His voice roughened. Stay and let me spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. Sable felt tears prick her eyes. She thought about the life she'd been living. Quiet, invisible, safe. A life built on fear, on the assumption that wanting more only led to losing more. Then she thought about the fire, about running into flames for a stranger, about the way Theron looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Yes, she whispered. Joy transformed his face. Relief, wonder, something fierce and bright. Yes? Yes to staying. Yes to being your mate. She laughed through her tears. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promise. His arms came around her, lifting her off the ground, spinning her in a circle while Cinder barked with excitement at their feet. When he set her down, both of them breathless and laughing, she pressed her forehead to his chest. I should warn you, she murmured. I have no idea how to be a queen. Neither did my mother when she started. You'll learn. He tilted her chin up. And I'll be beside you every step. We figure it out together, remember? Together, she agreed. The mating ceremony was held under the full moon, the same moon that Varan had planned to use for his attack, now reclaimed for celebration. The entire pack gathered in the great hall, torches blazing, voices raised in songs that had been sung for generations. Sable wore deep green silk that Theron had commissioned from the finest seamstress in the territory, the fabric shot through with silver threads that caught the light like stars. Cinder stood beside her, groomed until his silver fur gleamed, a ribbon of green silk tied around his neck. He'd refused to leave her side during the preparations, and eventually everyone had stopped trying to separate them. Theron waited at the hall's center, dressed in formal black with his family crest emblazoned on his chest. When Sable entered, his expression transformed. Wonder, reverence, love so open it stole her breath. She walked to him through a sea of faces, Corvin, grinning despite himself, Brennick, who had become something like a friend during the hunt for Varan, dozens of warriors and servants and pack members who had accepted her with surprising ease. When she reached Theron, he took her hands and the hall fell silent. Before these witnesses, he said, his voice carrying to every corner, I claim Sable as my mate, not because of politics, not because of duty, but because my heart recognized hers from the moment we met. Because she ran into fire for a stranger. Because she faced down assassins and traitors without flinching. Because she is the bravest, most stubborn, most remarkable person I have ever known. Sable's throat tightened. Before these witnesses, she managed, I accept Theron as my mate. Not because he's the Alpha King, not because he saved my life, but because he saw me, really saw me, when I'd spent years trying to be invisible. Because he gave me a choice when he could have demanded obedience. Because he makes me believe I deserve happiness, even when I'd forgotten how to want it. Theron's eyes glistened. He raised their joined hands, and the pack's healer, a young woman named Petra, who had replaced Isolde, stepped forward with the ceremonial blade. The cuts were shallow, symbolic. Blood welled up, and when Sable pressed her palm to Theron's, she felt the bond snap fully into place, not a chain, but a bridge. Connection without captivity, partnership without possession. Magic flared between them, visible as golden light that made the pack gasp. When it faded, Sable felt different. Complete in a way she hadn't known she was incomplete. Theron leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. Forever, he whispered, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Forever, she whispered back. He kissed her, and the pack erupted in cheers that shook the rafters. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was feasting and dancing and toasts that grew increasingly ridiculous as the wine flowed. Cinder darted through the crowd, accepting treats from everyone, a small silver ambassador of joy. Sable danced with Theron, with Corvin, with warriors she barely knew who welcomed her with gruff sincerity. She ate food she couldn't name, and drank wine that tasted like summer, and laughed more than she had in years. When they finally slipped away, the sky was lightening to gray, and weariness was catching up. Theron led her to their chambers. His chambers, now hers too, and she marveled at the enormity of it. "I keep expecting to wake up," she admitted, standing at the window overlooking the mountains. "To find this was all a dream." Theron came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "If it's a dream, we're sharing it. Is this really my life now? Castles and ceremonies and being called Your Majesty? If you want it to be." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "But more importantly, it's us. Whatever else comes, that's what matters." She turned in his arms, studying his face in the early light. "Tell me something I don't know." He thought for a moment. "The night I found you outside the mill, before I knew anything about you, I felt the bond stir. Just a whisper, but enough to make me wonder if my wolf was playing tricks on me. And now? Now I know he was trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to hear." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "That you were mine, that I was yours, that everything leading up to that moment was just preparation for finding you." Sable felt tears threaten again. "That's impossibly romantic." "I have my moments." She laughed and kissed him, and he responded with a tenderness that made her feel cherished beyond measure. They fell asleep tangled together, the bond humming between them, the future stretching out before them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, Sable stood on the battlements, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. So much had changed. The conspiracy's last remnants had been rooted out, the territories stabilized, alliances strengthened. She'd learned to navigate council meetings and diplomatic functions, to speak with authority even when she felt like an imposter. The people had accepted her, some grudgingly, most with genuine warmth, and she'd begun to feel like she belonged. Cinder had grown from a trembling pup into a young wolf with his father's intelligence and his uncle's fierce loyalty. He still followed Sable everywhere, still slept at the foot of her bed, still looked at her with those amber eyes like she'd hung the moon. And Theron? "You're up early." She turned to find him approaching, his hair sleep-tousled, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders against the morning chill. He looked younger like this, softer, the weight of kingship temporarily set aside. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Too much thinking." He joined her at the wall, slipping one arm around her waist. "Good thoughts or bad thoughts?" "Mostly good. I was remembering the fire, the mill, how terrified I was." "And now?" She leaned into him, breathing in his scent, pine and wood smoke and home. "Now I'm grateful. If not for that fire, I never would have found you. Never would have found this. You saved Cinder's life. You saved mine, in a different way." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I think the universe owed you something good. The universe owed me a king. The universe owed you someone who would love you the way you deserve." His arms tightened around her. "I'm just lucky it was me." Sable smiled, but something else tugged at her attention. A flutter in her stomach, a secret she'd been carrying for 3 days. "Theron?" "I have something to tell you." He pulled back slightly, studying her face. "Is something wrong?" "No. Something very right, actually." She took his hand and pressed it against her stomach, watching his expression shift from confusion to dawning wonder. Yes. Yes." For a long moment he simply stared at her, his hand trembling against her belly. Then his face broke into a smile so radiant it stole her breath. "A child," he whispered. "Our child." "Our child," she confirmed. He gathered her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, laughing with a joy she'd never heard from him before. When he set her down, there were tears on his cheeks. The Alpha King, the Iron Wolf, crying with happiness. "I thought I'd lost everything," he said, his voice rough. "My parents, my brother, nearly my nephew. I thought my bloodline would end with me, that I'd spend my life alone, carrying a kingdom until it crushed me." He cradled her face in his hands. "And then, you appeared out of smoke and fire and gave me everything I'd stopped hoping for." Sable covered his hands with hers. "You gave it to yourself by being the man you are. I just recognized what was already there." "No." He shook his head. "You gave me the courage to want it, to believe I deserved it." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and her lips. "You're my miracle, Sable. You and this child and every day we have together." Below them, the castle was waking. Servants bustled through courtyards. Warriors began their morning drills. And somewhere, Cinder barked at a squirrel that had ventured too close to his territory. Life went on. It always did. But now, for the first time in as long as she could remember, Sable was grateful for it. She thought about the woman she'd been, afraid, invisible, and certain that happiness was something that happened to other people. That woman wouldn't recognize her now, wouldn't believe this was possible, but it was. All of it. The love, the family, the future growing inside her. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was speaking to Theron or the universe, or the strange twist of fate that had sent her running into a burning mill. For what? For finding me, for seeing me, for giving me a reason to stop surviving and start living. Theron pulled her close, and they watched the sun rise together, wrapped in each other and the bond that had brought them home. Sable had used her last strength to save a wolf pup from the flames. The Alpha King had found her collapsing, and somehow, impossibly, they'd found their way to forever. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.